The Gensler group, the Gensler presentation, and also our CEO group, our executive group, and a lot of wisdom on that panel. Yeah, everybody just come on and sit down, find you a seat. Good morning, I'm Steve Berry. I'm President and CEO of Competitive Carriers Association. On behalf of everyone from CCA, welcome to the last day of the CCA's 2018 Annual Convention. Hope you're enjoying yourselves. I'd also like to welcome those who are joining us, our live stream this morning. Thanks to our broadcast partner, RCR Wireless. Thank you, RCR. Appreciate it. I noticed outside that I haven't been promoting our Voice magazine. Really ask you, we have copies out there. Go pick one up, go look at it. It's a great way of finding out who's focused on policy issues and providing the ecosystem services and our CCA members. I know that I've said that we're an advocacy group, and that we are. This is one of our advocacy tools. Go take a look at it. You'll get a good flavor for not only the people that support CCA, but the policy issues. Every member of Congress, every FCC commissioner, and every federal official that we meet with gets a copy of this. We use this as our introduction card, and I think it's one quick way of finding out what is the ecosystem that supports wireless carriers, rural, regional, and nationwide. So take a look and a gander at it. I will tell you that you won't see any other show magazine that will have as many policy issues and substantive policy issues of concern to Washington, D.C. than ours. So take a look at it and join, advertise in it, and provide some articles that are important to you and your part of the business. Okay, now that we've got some coffee and everyone's getting some breakfast, let's move on. I would like to thank our Pinnacle sponsors. Hopefully you remember their names, and their names are all on the walls over here, and it's Ericsson, Huawei, Interop Technologies, Nokia, Sprint, T-Mobile, and TNS. And they're absolutely critical to being able to put this show on and bring our community together. Also, your breakfast sponsors. I'd like to thank our carriers. 18 of our carriers and 2 of our board members, our sponsors, are in your show program. I think that's saying a lot. 18 of our carriers want to say thank you to you and the associate members that have sponsored our show. So thank you for putting your money where your mouth is, carriers. Thank you so very much. Okay, this morning we have 2 wonderful segments lined up for you in addition to the Achievement Awards, our annual Achievement Awards. But before we move on, I'd like to take maybe 3 or 4 minutes to share some of the highlights of the topics facing CCA, and we included in our annual meeting yesterday, especially our advocacy issues. Now, for those who joined us in that annual meeting yesterday, I mentioned a number of these issues and went in probably more depth, but I'll just single out 3 right now that I think are high level and I think everyone would have interest in. First, spectrum, the true lifeblood of the wireless industry. Many competitive carriers, our members, had very great success in the 600 megahertz auction, but the job is not done. We have to get that spectrum in use. So this newly acquired spectrum is a priority for us. We've also continued to work closely with the policymakers at the FCC to ensure a smooth and timely repacking and integrate this spectrum into your networks in the 39 months congressionally mandated. Beyond the 600 megahertz, we maintain a laser focus on critical spectrum needs of our members as we move forward to the 5G and IoT world. For example, the FCC has begun auction process for millimeter wave spectrum, and we are hopeful that we'll have a positive outcome on the 3.5 spectrum this fall. The FCC just announced that on October 23rd they will have the 3.5 proceeding on the agenda. So we hope that our input and our collective efforts will prove positive for our members. Rest assured we will keep a close eye on that. In the meantime, we continue to press ahead on the crucial millimeter wave spectrum that all of our members are concerned about, particularly in the rural areas. So that brings us to another key issue, all rural carriers Mobility Fund 2. Many of our members receive funds under the Mobility Fund 2 USF support. And this is a key priority for us and will remain so. We had, I think, an important win on the Mobility Fund 2. CCA worked with a bipartisan group of dozens of members of Congress, the House and the Senate, to push the FCC to extend the challenge process, which it did by 90 days. That is real dollars for build out in rural America. So sometimes it's hard to put a dollar sign beside an advocacy effort. Clearly, this is one that brings tens of millions of dollars to CCA members. This means that every member, every carrier, would have additional 90 days to clean up the maps, the very poor and inadequate maps that the FCC has provided, to determine the eligibility of the financial support areas. And rest assured, Mobility Fund 2 will remain a significant priority in the coming months. And for the next decade, this challenge process will make or break the difference between $4.53 billion of support for rural America. So yes, we're on it. The third key priority I wish to touch on this morning is infrastructure reform. We had a great presentation by Commissioner Carr yesterday. We have spent a lot of resources, effort, and time on this issue. We've testified multiple times on the House and the Senate. CCA has had the privilege of serving on the Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee, the BDAC as we call it, at the FCC, where I think we made important recommendations and supported and represented our members extremely well on the streamlining the siting policies. And we had a huge FCC success on infrastructure, as we heard from Commissioner Carr yesterday. There will be challenges ahead, but we are on a much better trajectory to get to the 5G ready world. That's one area that I'm really proud that we've worked with other trade associations and ourselves, but we've been a policy leader on that. And I thank Commissioner Carr for recognizing that yesterday in his comments. We continue to work with committees on both the House and the Senate, as well as the Rural Caucus and the caucuses that focus on enhancing and streamlining the build out for additional infrastructure capabilities. Actually, the Senate today will vote on one of the provisions that bills we've been working on for almost 2 years, the FAA tower siting. We have worked hard with our other members to include language in there that would correct some of the deficiencies and some of the costs and expenses in the FAA tower siting language that was put in place a year or so ago. We think this is going to not only enhance our members' ability to site, but it will also save us millions of dollars. So that, you don't want to count your chickens before they hatch, but the Senate is supposed to, before we finish today, they're supposed to vote on the conference report and send it to the President for signature. And I hope that we'll be able to report to you in our press release in a very few days that it's been signed into law. Good work to our legislative and regulatory team. In summary, I'm pleased to say that in 2018 has been very busy. I think we've had some really good successes. While the industry continues to evolve, we will continue to work tirelessly on your behalf to advance our members' priorities, and I thank you for your support and engagement. So now, I would like to turn to this morning's first speaker. I think we have a great session set up. Sharon Lessard. Sharon is the Global Retail Leader for Gensler and also serves as the International Vice President for Retail Design Institute. She's known in the retail world as a real problem solver and is a true expert on connecting with consumers. Our members asked more from this type of expertise and information on the retail requirements in the store of the future. Well, here it is. We're trying to deliver, and I'm sure that Sharon will not disappoint. We had a great work, I guess a work session on Monday, and I understand it was interactive and everyone picked up a lot of good information. So now she's here today to share some of that with you. So let me, it's my pleasure to welcome Sharon Lessard. Please give her a big warm welcome. Sharon.
Thank you very much. Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I've had a great couple of days here, not only having the workshop on Monday, but then also spending time with not all of you, but several of you over dinner and drinks and poolside last night. And I've learned a ton about the rural industry as it relates to cellular, so thank you for all of those insights. On Monday, we actually had a really great couple of hours in the afternoon to workshop, and I'm going to share a little bit of those insights with you. What was odd for me was to actually have a workshop prior to having a keynote. It felt a little backwards, but I actually think it helped enrich what I'm going to talk about today. As Stephen said, we are a global design firm. We focus on architecture, interior design, as well as graphic design, digital design, and we specialize in a lot of different areas, and I tend to specialize in retail and brand design. And one thing that Gensler does a lot of with its client base, as well as just in general, is a lot of research. And one thing that we're very focused on is research around experience. How many people use the word experience on a daily basis? Okay. It's really important. It's a buzzword, but it's also a really critical word as it relates to retail. Because as you know, you can really do anything you want with services and products today in terms of purchasing online or having it delivered to you. And so why in the world would you want to have a brick and mortar experience anymore? Well, it's very near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure it is as well to yours. So Gensler really deep dived into what does experience mean, and I'm going to share with you today the retail portion of the retail design experience. So the role of the store has changed, and we really wanted to dig into it and truly understand why. And so through research, we started thinking about the traditional experience of a Starbucks. It's not the only thing that generated the idea, but if you think about Starbucks and how many locations it has globally and how they had to shift their model and really start thinking about it differently as people were thinking about the hanging out space, the third space, and what it meant. And so this probably looks like one of your Starbucks on many corners in your communities. But this is what the new Starbucks looks like. Has anybody been to a roastery lately? So this is the largest Starbucks in the world. It's in Shanghai, China. And we just opened it with them not so many months ago. And it's all about experience. It's still about selling a $6 cup of coffee, but it's also about engagement and really making sure that the environment that you're coming into is engaging, is inspiring, has some discovery aspect to it, and really has a purpose to come into the store and socially engage. And so, the lines that you see above in the ceiling, those are actually tubes of beans flying through the air so you can actually hear it as you're sitting there and experiencing it. If you download the app, you can actually walk around the store and have QR code interactions and really learn about where the beans are from and how coffee is grown and how long it took to make that cup of coffee. And you can just smell what's happening in the experience and taste everything and really savor it. So the experience really matters, and the expense of changing the experience really matters. So it's all about experience. So customer expectations are really high these days. Anybody know what this is? This is Cadillac House. This is in Soho in New York. Everybody know what Cadillac is? So this is a different way of selling a car or experiencing a car or experiencing a brand. There may be cars in this experience. There may be the ability to work with the sales associate and talk about what you want your next Cadillac to be. But first and foremost, it's a place to hang. It's a place where Cadillac wanted to bring its brand forward in a community where you could actually create event space, you could have coffee, you could have pop-up shops, you could have a workspace for the day. And it was less about selling cars and more about giving people an opportunity to really engage with the brand in a different way. So the next time you're in New York, I encourage you to go see this because it's quite an experience. And Cadillac is actually shifting a lot of these elements that we created within this space to their showrooms, to not make it as fully experiential as this, but to have that flavor of it's more than just a showroom, it's actually a place for people to come together and engage. So here's where some of the data comes in terms of where we're going. You know, by 2020, which it's not very far away, people are really going to be making and spending more money for experience versus product. You know, if you think about it, every retailer that's thinking about flagship differently or their spaces differently are really thinking about how do I make sure that that experience is different than just selling a product and a service. You know, 86% of consumers, you know, will pay for a customer experience. And then about 50% of organizations today, and I'm sure some of you in the audience, are really thinking about how you're investing your dollars. I had a couple of conversations around how you spend at a carrier your dollars. Do you do one store at a time to do a facelift, or do you actually do a whole brand reimmersion and think about how your brand is coming to market from a consumer standpoint? That's on top of mind these days, to really make sure that if you're going to have a brick and mortar, that there is a purpose to come there. So Gensler really wanted to dig a little deeper and put some definition around what experience means. So we invested in that work. Any of you that go out onto our website, you can actually download the Retail Experience Index along with other research documents. We spend quite a bit of our own money on an annual basis really doing research. I'm actually leading a team right now that's expanding on this particular finding where sensory design, really taking into consideration everything about the experience, not just the physicality of it, but what do you smell, what do you hear, what do you taste, what do you touch, how all of those sensory elements really do enhance the design. But our initial work is around just retail experience in general. And in our findings, what we found was if you were to look at this pie, about 49% of what an experience does for a consumer is very task-oriented. I go in and I pay a bill, and then I leave. Or I go in and I purchase a phone, and then I leave. So if you make that task seamless, effortless, easy, even enjoyable, then you've solved half of the consumer's problem. And that allows you to really think about the other 51%. And what we found in our research, the other 51% is really the purpose of brick and mortar. It's where you want people to hang. It's where you want people to commune. It's where you want people to engage. And so if you think about discovery, or you think about engagement from a social standpoint, or if you think about entertainment, or even, education, what are those nuggets that you can create that support and supplement the convenience of that task? That allows the consumer to really engage with your brand in a different way. So we went deeper in this. And through our findings, through both qualitative and quantitative, as we were asking people that really cared about design, as well as they didn't really think about design, and really wanted to understand how that experience of a physical store mattered, the data really helped us filter through and create these different findings. So with everything, when you're doing research, you want to have a framework. And this is a simple framework, which we've tested out quite a bit. And it's really interesting that you can apply it to so many different industries. If you think about the consumer and you think about why they're coming into a space, there's an expectation. They're going to engage or learn something about your brand before they ever even come in. And then there's an intention of why they're coming in. And then the space that's created needs to take into account the expectation and the intention. And then when you think about that holistically, then you can really have an engaging experience. So at the center of the intention is broken out into these modes I talked about. So if you think about task, take care of task, I have to pay my bill, or I have to purchase a phone, or I have to upgrade something, make that as seamless and as wonderful as possible. That gets it out of the consumer's mind. And then you have the ability to really enhance the social aspect, the entertainment, the discovery, and the aspiration. And not all of those modes are necessary in every experience. And when we've used these modes as we're thinking about journeys of a consumer, and a lot of what we do before we ever start designing space is really thinking about, again, who's going to be interacting with that space. If task is always part of the intention, and you really want to amp up, like Starbucks, the discovery, or the social, and even entertainment, there's maybe not aspiration, but there could be. But if you were thinking about Cadillac, maybe you can't afford the car, or you can't afford the most expensive car, but you have this aspiration of being in that brand experience, and you get a little taste of that. You know, how do you think of those different modes as you're creating that experience for your consumer? As we did the research, we needed to have a scorecard. You know, usually when we work with our clients, we like to, again, frame up what problem we're trying to solve, and then we wanted to have a measurement in terms of how successful we were being. And so again, part of our research really did frame how do you score experience around the expectation, intention, and space. And we, you know, have these 4 evaluations in terms of great experience, I'm going to tell a friend or family member, what's my likelihood to return, and then the perceived quality of the product. So this is something that I've sort of coined as I talk to, you know, my team, my clients, and at conferences like this. You know, retail isn't dead, it's just different. So the headlines are not misleading, but for every retailer that's closing these days, there's at least 1 or 2 that are opening. And online are turning to brick and mortar more and more because they want to engage with their consumer in a physical environment. So the future, you know, design truly remarkable experiences. Like I said, we did a lot of work, and we had key findings out of that research. I'm not going to read through all of this, but the headlines, you know, impact a store makes, embracing the blur, it's all about the journey, experience at any age, every moment counts, and shopping is still shopping. Like I mentioned earlier, on Monday we did a workshop, and we actually used these 6 key findings as the foundation for the work that we did. So we broke out into 3 groups, and we tackled 2 of these each. And on the first one, if you think about the impact of the store and what it makes, if you have a really well-designed store, there's actually a perceived value of the product that's enhanced. We've done this with several of our clients. This particular photograph is about a fitting room area for CCA, that's where I am. CNA, which is a brand in Europe. And they're like a 150-year-old company. We didn't change the product. We didn't change the assortment. We changed the way the store was designed. We changed the way the modes of the journey were taken. And we definitely elevated the experience. And when we did surveys with the consumer base, they perceived the value of the products a lot higher. And the prices didn't change, and the quality didn't change. So design does matter. This is some of the sticky note work that we did on Monday, where we were specifically talking to the carriers that were at the table, and just some of the challenges, thinking about, you know, that problem to solve. And, you know, differently than some retailers where traffic is an issue, your traffic is an issue, meaning you have very full stores. And so how do you think about that experience differently in terms of what you're presenting to the consumer? Are you elevating the service aspect? Are you elevating the local aspect? You know, what are some of those nuances that you can be thinking about to really make the value of your store enhanced? You know, it's all about the journey. if somebody's coming into a carrier, and that's something that we talked about, excuse me, on a frequent basis, 12 or more times a year, how do you think about that repetition? Do you show something new every time? Do you think about your environment on a monthly basis, and how do you change something about it so that it's not so transactional when your consumer is coming in to pay their bill or to purchase a new phone or to think about something different that they need from you? Every move counts. You're in the technology business, and I know a lot of the presentations that you have in your stores are supplied to you by other carriers or other products. And just think about technology. If you're going to show something, make sure that it's relevant, make sure that it's current, because consumers know when something's outdated. Consumers know when they're not being relevant to them in the moment. So be thinking about what you're presenting and be thinking about how frequently you change that content. Again, some of the things that we talked about as a group. Embracing the blur. I already talked quite a bit about this at the very beginning, but thinking about, servicing the task side and how do you make that maybe even memorable, but making sure that it is not something that is so top of mind for a consumer when they're coming into your space. How do you enhance something on a monthly basis or a weekly basis, or really think about locally relevant either content or some sort of communication that allows your consumer to engage in your physical environment when he or she is in there. And this was really interesting, experience at every age. We were having a conversation last night around the pool about just thinking about, the different generations that we're serving these days as we're thinking about business. And each one of them is very different. But in our workshop, there was a lot of conversation about age. But one thing that was brought up was, don't think about necessarily servicing each age group, but think about, what is that environment and what are they, what problem are you trying to solve, and how can you think about that experience more holistically and make sure that you're not segmenting too dramatically. And then last but not least, shopping is still shopping. People, when they're doing more than, again, one mode, and I keep harping on task because that seems to be the thing that most consumers are really thinking about these days. How do I make my journey that more convenient? How is speed going to really help me, get on with my day? Shopping is still shopping, and people, when they're doing more than one thing in an environment, they are more engaged, they're more likely to stick around, they're more likely to come back. So as you're thinking about your store environment and you're thinking about your space, make sure you're thinking about more than just the task. So, what I want you to all leave with is, design is about a complete experience. Some things that we think about when we're talking with our clients is, customers should always be top of mind. The purpose should always be, what you're thinking of. Why are they coming to you, and what are they going to be doing in your space? Manage expectations. What does your consumer want when they're coming into your environment? Again, is it to drop off a bill? Is it to purchase a phone? Is it to add services? Is it to, think about and learn something more locally? Is it about, having gatherings? Really be purposeful about what the expectation is. And then create spaces that are engaging, that are interacting, that are inspiring. This is another shot of the coffee bar in Cadillac, and you can see how the cars are displayed down the middle. But it's something that you wouldn't expect of a showroom. And then, design is the difference between good and great. We did actually, through our research, find that, the better designed spaces really got higher marks. And so think about, design is not only about, finishes and materials. It's about organization. It's about ease of navigation. It's really about making sure that the consumer can really enjoy the environment that they're in. And that is it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Listen. Wow, thank you, Sharon, and thank you for that fascinating take on what it takes to connect with consumers, an issue all of us in the room are focused on. And so if you need help with designing a new store, putting a new retail face on your operations, now you have a good head start. Sharon Lessard, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, now I would like to turn to our CEO panel, where we will hear firsthand from our regional carriers about what strategies are working for them, maybe learn what they see ahead for us. Leading the discussion and introducing